This episode of Prestige Junkie is brought to you by Paramount Plus, presenting Landman, starring Billy Bob Thornton, Allie Larder, Demi Moore, and John Hamm. The Chicago Sun-Times says Thornton gives a top 5 career performance in headlining an outstanding ensemble. Emmy eligible in all categories. Hi, everyone. The Cannes Film Festival has concluded, and in addition to demonstrating some of the best red carpet fashion that we see all year, it hosted the premiere of half a dozen, maybe even more films that we will be talking about for many more months, including, I am sure, all the way through to the Oscars. There are a ton of stories to get into about everything that happened, from the continued Cannes dominance of neon to Alexander Skarsgård in leather pants. So to join me, I have brought back my friend and the co-host of the This Had Oscar Buzz podcast, Chris Feil. Chris, like me, has been following Cannes from afar, but has been really tracking the narratives, and to the point that he won our friendly Cannes Fantasy League. So you should really trust him.
Bragging rights.
After Chris and I talk, you'll hear my conversation with Britt Lower and Dan Erickson, the star and creator of Apple's Severance, about the big leaps that they took for the show's dazzling second season. I'm Katie Rich, and this is the Prestige Junkie Podcast. Okay, so Chris, as we heard, you're resting on your bragging rights from winning the Cannes pool, which is more complicated than I feel like I want to explain on the air. But it does mean that before Cannes starts, when all of these titles in competition are, to me, just phrases, like with a director attached to them I may have heard of, you really do the research to kind of think about like how this festival is going to go.
Almost like I like to obsess about these type of things. As far as our pool goes, I just had the great foresight to predict Alexander Skarsgård in leather pants as winning the Palm.
Or did he win the queer palm, or both of them?
He won the pants palm, the golden pants.
Yeah, so there's a whole slate of non-competition movies, including the Alexander Skarsgård movie Pillion. There's another Skarsgård in another competition movie, just to keep everyone on their toes. There's just a lot of titles that come out from Cannes, and it is, for a lot of this, like there's the Palme d'Or winner, which is very clear to us, but then there's other stuff that premieres that like doesn't necessarily win a prize, but feels like it could get buzz. It's like a top tier of like, okay, Neon's going to push this for an Oscar movie, and then kind of stuff bubbling below the surface, like the Alexander Skarsgård movie. There's like a lot of different lanes you can pick from Cannes buzz, I feel like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this is not just like the main competition we're talking about. This was also a festival where multiple noteworthy actors had their feature film debuts as directors. None of them in the main competition. So definitely a lot to feed us for the rest of the year.
Yeah, there we go. So it really just does make sense to start with the awards. We're recording this on Sunday, the day after the awards were handed out. And I saw, as you were kind of live texting me the results, you sent along a video of Jafar Panahi, the Iranian director, when he was announced as the Palme winner. He's sitting in these black sunglasses and a suit in the theater and just kind of leans back in his chair and soaks it all in. And it really is this like iconic moment. Like if you've never heard of this director before, you'd be like, oh, that guy, he looks like he is a cool director. And it felt
absolutely.
Like a real Stars Born moment to me for his movie It Was Just an Accident, which Neon picked up at the festival, correct? This is the big 6th Palme in a row for our friends at Neon.
One of their many buys this festival.
Yes. I mean, did it feel like Neon was just on a buying streak saying, okay, we're hedging our bets, we will make sure we have that Palme winner?
I mean, some of that is hard not to feel. I would also say Mubi was also on a buying spree. At least they picked up 2 films, both The Sound of Falling, which tied for the jury prize, and Lynn Ramsey's Jennifer Lawrence starring Die My Love, which was a pretty sizable buy. They paid over $20 million to distribute that movie. But also, Mubi was buying a lot of international rights to things that already had the U.S. rights picked up. So it was kind of both of those distributors really being the only pickup story throughout the festival.
Yeah, as we record this, those pretty much are the only people who have picked up movies, and we'll talk about some other ones that came in with major U.S. distributors behind them. But for It Was Just an Accident, like I'd heard a couple of people say this was maybe one of the easier years to know what the Palme winner was going to be. Why did it feel like such a runaway choice for the top prize?
Well, I mean, I think anyone who has followed his story and his career, he was previously set under house arrest, has made films while under house arrest, and including This Is Not a Film, which was smuggled out of the country, I believe, in a USB trapped inside of a cake.
Wait, we back up? So he's from Iran. He has made films that the Iranian government is not especially fond of, and the Iranian government has, more control over free speech than in our country, for now at least. So
yes.
Why is it that he has been such a dissident, I guess is the best way to describe him?
Because he's kept making movies, and he's disobeyed. His house arrest. And has been a mainstay on the festivals, but also was part of, a global filmmaking community show of support, including Juliette Binoche, Cannes jury president this year, of, filmmakers around the globe supporting him and, decrying his house arrest that he's had. But it's also been an element of his films as well. Like, he works in kind of 1 foot in fiction, 1 foot in nonfiction filmmaking.
Yeah, so he's allowed to make films in Iran. This film was made in Iran, right? But without necessarily the blessing of the Iranian government?
This I am not, the details I have not quite caught up to because, as is the case with most of his movies, they're kind of done in secret. So I'm not sure if it was actually filmed in Iran or not.
But it's set there. It is very much a story about that country.
Yes, the plot line for this is just that a simple accident goes wrong and has a domino effect of consequences throughout the course of the movie. I've heard it compared to like a Waiting for Godot type situation, and that there's this very dark existential comedy element to it. That sounds very exciting for at least Panahi's usual tone.
Well, and he was able to come to Cannes for, I think, the first time. Like, he's had trouble, like, leaving the country. Like you said, he was under house arrest. So it does seem like he's in this, having a newfound ability to be able to kind of be part of this international film community in person and not just from a distance.
Absolutely. I mean, and to see him accept an award in person is itself satisfying. But the fact that he won the Palm just has this real kind of full circle moment for, I think, the global film community.
Yeah. I mean, last year with Seat of the Sacred Fig, we kind of got, maybe a practice round for having a film that's made in Iran about Iran submitted into the Oscar race by another country. I think it was just an accident. It has funding from France and Luxembourg. It seems like it will probably be a submission from one of those countries. But the idea of a filmmaker who is not on great terms with his home country traveling to the U.S. right now, given the state for people who are not native-born citizens, I'm very intrigued to see how Jafar Panahi's award season plays out.
Especially as freedom of speech is a very relevant thing for us here in the States right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking about like politically relevant things, like obviously Cannes is not about the U.S. It's very much not. Like there are no American winners of any of these awards, I don't think. But with The Secret Agent winning Best Director and Best Actor, also about a repressive government set in Brazil in the 70s, a time period that many Americans, including me, now feel like we understand because of the movie I'm Still Here. It feels like that's going to be barnstorming right through our award season too and making us confront some of the same stuff going on here now.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe have a little bit more of a mainstream because I'm Still Here, great movie, is still kind of like this character study. The Secret Agent has kind of a broader canvas.
Although I've heard it's kind of experimental also. Like it might not be accessible in the same way I'm Still Here was.
Well, with a lot of Philo's work, that's not fully surprising to hear that. Okay. He'd previously directed Bacurau from a previous Cannes winner, and also Aquarius starring Sonia Braga, a movie that I'm a huge fan of. And there are elements to both of those movies that stray into, more expressionistic filmmaking, I guess you could say.
Okay. But so Wagner Moura, who's the star of this movie, is like an American star in a lot of ways. I was just realizing that he's on Dope Thief, a show that's in the Emmy race. Like he's a face that people know. He's a person that awards voters know. So that could be a really interesting turn in the award season as well. And his performance, people just are raving about it.
And the production still that the filmmakers keep using of him in that movie is already, driving people crazy.
Very sexy.
Very
it can't
sexy.
hurt you in an awards race. Did it make sense to you that it was just an accident would take the Palm and Secret Agent is kind of more or less like one of the second or third place prizes? Like they like to spread the wealth in this way, right? Yeah,
The Secret Agent wins multiple prizes. I think that was somewhat of a surprise because Cannes, I think, tries to avoid doing that, especially because Feil won the director prize. That's considered a large prize, so they normally want to spread the wealth. So this was a big show of affection for this movie in particular.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Wagner Moura winning this award definitely levels him up in a way that I think is going to keep a lot of attention on this performance.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Technically, the second place winner is the grand prize, which is Sentimental Value, which is another title that I do think, like, even following this from afar, it just became very clear which ones everyone could really agree on. And it was The Secret Agent. It Was Just an Accident, and Sentimental Value were kind of the big three. So them being the big three winners makes sense. Sentimental Value is from Joachim Trier, who had a big breakthrough a couple years ago with The Worst Person in the World. This movie not only has Renata Reinsve, who everyone fell in love with in that movie, but Elle Fanning and Stellan Skarsgård, people who are even more famous in the U.S. What is not to get excited about in terms of an awards run? It's also picked up by Neon. It'll be part of that incredible package they've got this year. So I feel like of all of these, Sentimental Value is the one that could make like the biggest landfall when it comes back around in the fall.
Especially after, a lot of these movies at least arrive in a lineup with very simple plot lines. But then when this one actually arrived and we found out, oh, this is about people who make movies, we're going to be talking about this movie for the next few months. I think also reading the reviews that Stellan Skarsgård really is such a standout in a way that he could become one of this year's people that, they've been around for such a long time but never been nominated for an Oscar, and this finally brings them to that stage. I think it'll be exciting that it's Stellan Skarsgård.
Is he playing a nice dad or a mean dad or a little bit of both?
Great question. It sounds like a little bit of both,
Okay.
which could be interesting, or at least, if not a mean dad, one with a lot of damage and baggage.
I'm just thinking about the Best Supporting Actor nice dad streak that, if you're playing a nice dad in a movie, your chances of winning an Oscar get so congratulations on the Troy Kotsur Oscar win for Stellan Skarsgård. But also, like, he's been so good on Andor, as I keep talking about Andor. Like, it does feel like he's kind of, having been working in movies for 25 years plus, he's on a streak right now that is leading so perfectly to a lot of attention for this.
Listen, Emmys straight to Oscars. Maybe he and Jeremy Allen White will become buds or something. Who knows?
Oh, I'd not been thinking about that movie. Okay, so we were talking about movie earlier. I want to talk about some of the other studios and what they brought and how they did. But anything else from the award winners that you want to single out?
No, I think a lot of people were really impressed by Seurat, which also tied for the jury prize along with Sound of Falling. Though Seurat got picked up by Neon, Sound of Falling got picked up by Movie. Sound of Falling sounds like a kind of really rigorous movie that is going to be distancing for some people, but could, who knows, be a strong international feature contender based off of the strength of the result. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Seurat as well, especially coming from Neon, who that's supposed to be quite a disturbing movie with quite some disturbing turns, but Neon probably knows how to do that given their past track record.
And Seurat is Spanish?
Yes.
Okay. So they tied for the jury prize, which is more or less third place. So yeah, Neon had so many of the winners. It's really crazy. Like, if they were trying to hedge their bets, as we were saying earlier, they did an excellent job of it.
Right.
Okay, so Mubi, as we were saying, they picked up Die My Love for a really big price tag. And, Jennifer Lawrence, I think even people who were feeling more mixed on the movie, it's from Lynn Ramsey. She does not necessarily make movies that everyone easily wraps their head around. We're raving about Jennifer Lawrence. And so seeing Mubi, fresh off of the run for The Substance, pick up another, like, starry actress-led movie, I think it makes perfect sense. It seems like a wise move for them, even if this movie might not have the, like, horror, midnight appeal that The Substance did.
That big payday that they did to acquire this movie, over $20 million, that's like Netflix money. That's what Netflix spends to
Netflix
buy
hasn't
a movie.
picked up anything as of this recording also, which is very interesting.
There was reporting that Richard Linklater's Nouvelle Vague is getting picked up by someone, but we don't know who.
It seems like a good bet to me.
So by the time this drops, who knows? But Mubi paying that much for a movie, I think, shows that the impact of The Substance is that it brought them really into the big leagues in terms of U.S. distribution. I know they have a bigger footprint globally than they're trying to build here, but that, I think, definitely cemented them as a real force.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they've also got 2 Josh O'Connor movies, which doesn't it seems like a good plan to me. I guess they had them both before the festival, The History of Sound and The Mastermind.
Yes.
So yeah, they just went all in on Josh O'Connor, which I think is wise in the year 2025.
It sounds like a good investment.
Yeah, so Kelly Reichardt is one of my favorite filmmakers. I'm a little behind on the reviews of The Mastermind. I know The History of Sound was a little bit of a soft reception. Did The Mastermind hit any bigger?
The Mastermind is the very last competition movie to play. So even when a movie like this gets a strong reception, it does kind of go under the radar. You've seen this happen before with Kelly Reichardt. You've seen it happen with Alice Rohrwacher, where it's just that last day. It's really hard to make some headway in terms of press. But so it got good reviews, but people are already moving on to the awards, and it won no awards.
No, I just feel like Showing Up got such like it's very nice treatment, and then it's like it's such a terrific movie. I mean, The Mastermind sounds a little bit more like plotty, which might help it get a little bit more attention. But it's also okay if Kelly Reichardt movies fly under the radar. The true heads know.
We will still be extremely excited to see it whenever we have the opportunity to.
What did you make of the reviews for The History of Sound? It's this, period love story starring Josh O'Connor and Paul Mescal. Like, I think there were a number of Brokeback Mountain puns going around, none of which I can remember off the top of my head. But I personally am ready to sit down and cry at this movie, even if everyone says it's like a little quiet. But I'm keeping the faith on that one.
My impression was Cannes was maybe not the right place to take it to have its world premiere, that a different festival might have been a more receptive audience to it, whereas I think this was respectfully mixed, that
is it too American? Like, what's the tone problem?
It's interesting because it's considered an American production, but not an American director and basically a non-American cast. They filmed it in it's set in Maine, or at least the story is set in Maine, and I think they filmed it in the U.S., right? Correct. And it's one of those things where you see a lot of reactions and reviews where they're like, it's just a nice romance, or it's just this historical.
Do you know how few of those we get?
Exactly.
Don't take it for granted.
By nature of appearing in Cannes competition, it's something as straightforward as that doesn't get, as warmly received. They want the Cannes audience wants to be a little bit more shaken up or wowed or something beyond just a straightforward gay romance. But I still think this is the type of movie that could come back around and bounce back when it finds some more.
Can you see this movie playing in Telluride in Toronto for audiences who love their movie stars and being all about it? I can.
Absolutely. I mean, just because you don't win a prize at Cannes doesn't mean movies, especially American movies, once they reach American audiences, don't bounce back.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like there was a sub-theme. Knowing The History of Sound is not the most American of movies, but there were also films from Richard Linklater, Wes Anderson, Ari Aster, who are really major American directors. All failed to win any awards. Nouvelle Vague may still get picked up. Eddington, the Ari Aster movie, is coming for May 24 this summer, right? It's a summer
July
release. And Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme is out in theaters now from Focus. It did feel like they got a little bit of a, okay, you're back kind of treatment, or am I reading too much into what the French are doing?
I definitely saw better responses to Nouvelle Vague. It seems
it is about the French, so
Sure, and it sounds like it is firmly just a Richard Linklater hangout movie set in the French New Wave.
Again, that sounds great. I'm not complaining.
I'm always down for a Linklater hangout movie. Eddington, I think we could have expected the reaction around that movie that it received. Are the Beau was Afraid people at least on board with it? That Ari Aster movie was pretty divisive, but it had its defenders. I haven't been able to tell who the Eddington defenders are. That will be a great question as this movie opens for us in the States. But it does seem, I didn't see as much pockets of high praise for Eddington as you maybe saw with Beau is Afraid, where, you have 2 or 3 people willing to go out on a limb for that movie, but everybody else is just kind of scratching their heads. It seems like nobody's really scratching their head about this movie because its themes are so explicit. But there were some people who had a good time. Also set in the
early days of COVID that no one feels that eager to revisit for understandable reasons.
No, absolutely not. And it sounds like some of this, name draws, like Emma Stone and Austin Butler, may not be in very much of the movie.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The Phoenician Scheme, though, even having not seen that movie, you kind of have to wonder if that was the one that was treated a little unfairly. Though I have heard from people who have seen it and they were maybe a little disappointed. But the reaction was, well, I guess Wes Anderson is here again. He's never had a movie at Cannes that's won a prize.
Yeah.
And I don't know. For me personally, the Wes Anderson movies that have gone to Cannes, I feel more apt to defend, like Asteroid City, that get a really mild reception at this festival. But then I think when they arrive here, I think they're much more interesting than they're given credit for. So I'm still hopeful for Phoenician Scheme.
We are in a weird period of being rude to Wes Anderson that I think will have to end at some point. I mean, he did win an Oscar in the midst of all this for his short films, but that's also kind of rude. That's how he finally won his Oscar. That he wasn't even there. I don't know. It's a weird way to be treating like one of our great directors these days.
He's at an interesting point in his career where I think his themes have maybe been never more interesting, but they're kind of tucked and hidden into his movies in a way that I think is fun to unpack. And I think the general consensus around him right now as well, he's just doing the Wes Anderson thing. It's all visual gags and
which is not easy at all. It's not like it's autopilot. I look forward to seeing the Phoenician Scheme, and maybe I'll weigh in it on this podcast in a little bit. Okay, as we said before, the non-competition part of the festival is massive. There's a lot to get into. Again, these are all a lot of movies that we have not seen. I wanted to start by contemplating Highest to Lowest, the Spike Lee movie, which I think along with the Phoenician Scheme was like one of those starrier premieres. Like everyone got very excited about Denzel Washington being there. He got an honorary palm at the beginning, and I think it feels like no one quite knows what to make of this movie, which makes me even more intrigued.
Yeah, it seemed like it had a positive reaction, but maybe it was quickly overlooked by other movies that were happening in the direct vicinity of it, because I don't feel like there was a lot of chatter about it, at least that I saw. And again, it's an out-of-competition movie, so people are talking about the competition, but an interestingly muted but positive reaction.
Yeah, I mean, that feels about right. It was going to be on Apple TV Plus before Toronto starts. I guess it's going to theaters and then is going to streaming very quickly, which grumble, grumble, grumble. I'm not a fan of it, but it means we'll all get to see it very soon. But it does feel like that release date plus that response is like that. This is not a Spike Lee Oscar season coming up, I don't think.
Yeah.
But, if the Knicks win the NBA championship, he'll be just as happy, so it will work out just
fine.
Speaking
of fashion on the red carpet, Spike showed up in his Knicks colors, looking fabulous.
I'm very happy for him. I'm very happy that he and Denzel both made it back to New York so that Denzel could be in Othello and Spike Lee could go watch the Knicks.
Yeah.
What non-competition movies are you intrigued by?
Just for my own taste, I'm very curious about this Jodie Foster in French language light comedy mystery called A Private Life or Vie Privée, if they're going to keep the French title here in America. Sony Classics is releasing it. Thierry Frémaux called it a marriage comedy, but all of the plot line we knew was that it was like a murder mystery. She's playing a therapist who's investigating her patient's suicide, who she believes it to be a murder or something of that effect. And then this context with Jodie Foster speaking French and hearing that it's a comedy, I am very intrigued, even if, the reviews were somewhat mild on this.
This all sounds very French. Like the idea of a French comedy translating to American audiences, even with Jodie Foster, is a little tough to wrap my head around.
And even if it's not great, I can guarantee you I'm going to have a good time at this movie.
Yeah, that sounds like a good hang. Sony Classics also has Eleanor the Great, the Scarlett Johansson directorial debut starring June Squibb, which I think we are all very firmly in the camp of let June Squibb cook, bring her everywhere you possibly can. And I understand that June Squibb Best Actress nominee may be a long shot, but I do feel like Thelma laid that groundwork, man, and I would be so excited to see it happen all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't see great reactions to this movie, but on the same token, everybody who said that it wasn't great said everybody in the theater with them was sobbing. So this is maybe also another movie that sounds like would have been better received at a different festival. It sounds a little cozy for Cannes, but that doesn't necessarily spell this thing as the narrative being closed on this movie. I think this is probably a movie we'll continue to hear about.
Yeah. Well, and then the other big actress directorial debut was Kristen Stewart's, which I felt like I saw a wave of positive reviews, then a wave of, oh my God, I don't know if I like this. And it still hasn't been picked up as far as I can tell.
It hasn't been picked up yet as of recording. I saw positive reviews as well. It's based off of a memoir. It sounds very based off of a memoir.
The Synchronicity of Water? No, what's it called?
The Chronology of Water, which is, I guess, the title of the memoir as well.
Not quite the Velocity of Autumn, but, getting there.
Just words on a dartboard.
I'm excited for Kristen Stewart. I do feel like whatever the fate of this is, it seems like she's putting her voice out there in an interesting way.
Yeah, I count myself as a Kristen Stewart fan. I was very, very happy that this movie went over well.
Can I be like a weird gossip person just for a second? So like Kristen Stewart was there with her movie. Robert Pattinson was there with Die My Love. Like, I feel like there's enough water under the bridge that we need to get those two on a red carpet again together. Like, not knowing anything about their lives. Like, maybe things were so awful they'll never speak to each other again. But I feel like everyone has moved on. Everyone is for the better. And we need some, like, stunt
actors
casting.
On actors.
Actors on actors would be great. Like, I feel I was never a twihard, but I do feel like they have gone on to be two of the most interesting actors in, like, world cinema at all, and we deserve to have them together again.
I was also not a twihard, and I love them both so much.
I know.
They're some of my favorite working actors.
Twilight is when the rest of us have been like, oh yeah, those guys. So anyway, someone get on that, broker a truce, and let us see this happen.
The other actor directorial debut, which did win a prize in a certain regard, is Urchin from Harris Dickinson, which I strangely saw like softies comparisons. It basically follows a character, I believe, dealing with addiction, but he's kind of a drifter as well, played by Frank Delane, who won the Best Actor prize in certain regard for the film. This hasn't been picked up for U.S. distribution yet, but based off the strength of the reviews, which I would maybe argue Harris Dickinson got the best reviews of these three movies.
Oh, good for him. I
think we'll see this picked up by somebody.
Okay. So I'll end, since we started by talking about Alexander Skarsgård's leather pants. We should talk about Pillion. Is that how you say it? Pillion? Or is it Pillon? Was it?
I don't believe it's French, so I would guess it's Pillion.
Pillion. Okay. That is the Harry Melling, Alexander Skarsgård, biker, BDSM, drama, love story kind of thing. It's like the reviews
dark
all
comedy romance, basically.
I think I was listening to Richard Lawson, my former colleague, talking about it and being like, it was because like surprisingly sweet and I really liked it. I was like, oh, that sounds nice. Like, I don't like the idea of like a intense like sadomasochistic relationship does not appeal to me, but give me a love story, I'll be there any day.
And also apparently very frank sexual discussion in this movie, as you would maybe guess when there's a BDSM element. Or maybe not, because past movies have been less frank about that. This movie it's going to be released by A24, presumably this fall. It sounds like one of the hits of Uncertain Regard in terms of everybody seemed to really like it. I think the exact tone of it that we're like, people are saying it's this and it's also this. I think that kind of surprised people, especially the sweetness of it.
Yeah.
Harry Melling, I think, is such an interesting actor who's
speaking of people who graduated out of
explode.
Franchises to do interesting stuff.
Absolutely. And like Harry Melling's also kind of quietly amassed this really impressive career where it's like he's been on streaming hits, he's worked with the Coens, and so I hope to see this launch him to the next level.
Yep. Okay, as we wrap this up, just to be like the real Oscar psychos about it, do you think the next Honora is in this group? Do we have a Best Picture winner? How Kansy do you feel like our Oscar race is going to be after all this?
I predicted that it would be less this year. Partly just, I called it a bubble bursting, but I expected Cannes to do... That's right. I expect Cannes to move in this direction of less broadly accessible, at least to Western audiences, in terms of winners. But I think, when you basically have a selection of competition movies that are pretty accessible compared to previous years, that may not be the case. However, I don't think we know yet what the big guns are this season moving forward enough to be able to
what's on the horizon.
And what are the major studios going to be putting out there? What's the narrative going to be? I think from these set of prize winners that have U.S. distribution, I think there are some interesting narrative opportunities in terms of what could play into the zeitgeist, where voters are today. But it's hard to say, I think, if we even have a Best Picture nominee in this lineup. Neon knows how to campaign a movie, so that certainly doesn't hurt. And I think Mubi also should be credited with how far they got the substance. So
Yeah, I was looking on Kalshi, the betting app where I every now and then can see what conventional wisdom is. And I did see, like, they have, you can put in money for who's going to get a Best Picture nomination, and Sentimental Value just rocketed up the predictions of what people think is going to get a Best Picture nomination. So
it's definitely probably the most likely of these movies to,
that was the vibe I was getting.
Land on that level.
Yeah. So yeah, place your bets now if you want to.
Yeah, but even so, it does sound. I also saw people comparing that to like a Bergman Autumn Sonata type vibe. That it's like this could also still be a movie that's too small for the Academy.
Well, I feel like we would have said that about Anora until all of a sudden we didn't. So
it's true. That's very true.
We never know how these things will take us. Chris, thank you for doing this with me. Congratulations again on your can pool victory. I look forward to you telling me why you're right about everything, because now your track record speaks for itself.
I would never.
This episode of Prestige Junkie is brought to you by Paramount Plus, presenting Landman, starring Billy Bob Thornton, Ali Larter, Demi Moore, and John Hamm. The drama series explores how roughnecks and billionaires are fueling a boom so big it's reshaping our climate, our economy, and our geopolitics. The Chicago Sun-Times raves. Thornton gives a top 5 career performance in headlining an outstanding ensemble. And NPR calls the series a masterful bit of storytelling magic. Awards eligible in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. So now let's hear my conversation with Britt Lower and Dan Erickson. She is the star, and he is the creator of Apple's Severance, which had a really breakthrough, excellent second season earlier this spring. The production of Severance has never been easy. They started when they were under full COVID protocols. They spent an entire episode this season shooting outside in the snowy woods. But I think that kind of production challenge really bonds people together. And it was interesting talking to Britt and Dan about how they bonded throughout that process and the trust they've built with each other that really paid off in this past season for Britt's character in particular. She was challenged to play not just her severed worker character, Helly, who has spent the entirety of Severance's run really rebelling against the company Lumen that employs all of our severed worker characters. And she's also playing Helly's Audi, Helena, who is the heiress to the entire fortune built by this dystopian workplace and is really against most of the things that Helly stands for. Britt had to play both characters this season, including at one point Helena posing as Helly. It got very complicated. So I asked Britt about playing both of those characters, and then to Dan about how he staggered out the reveals about Helly and Helena and all of the other twists this season and how to keep the audience on their toes and very engaged in this very engaging show. Hear it all in my conversation with Severance's Britt Lower and Dan Erickson. So Dan Erickson and Britt Lower, I have seen you guys do a lot of group interviews with the full cast of Severance. There's lots of different combinations of people who talk about this show, but I don't think I've ever seen you guys talk about each other and your specific working relationship between the two of you. And I wondered if to really throw it back for the beginning, what do you remember about when you started working together on the show? It was a COVID production. I think it was probably kind of a weird way to build a working relationship. But what do you guys remember about that time when you first started and how you kind of built the working relationship you have now?
Oh, man.
That's such a great question.
Just throwing it back to start.
Yeah. Well, Britt, let's spill the dirt on each other.
I know. Well, I'm trying to remember because it was 5 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember, I was still very afraid at that point of talking to actors about the show. I felt like I hadn't landed on my vocabulary with how I talk about the show versus like how actors like to approach it. And so I was kind of a big old jumble of nerves, I think, when we were getting started. And I just remember being very grateful that there was somebody so down to earth and just really wanted to make something cool and talk in good faith about it and was excited. And I remember invited me to her house and showed me the little mark on the bathroom door where she had kicked it during her audition. I just remember being very grateful for her presence in those early days.
I feel the same. I mean, thank you, Dan. Meeting Dan in person was, I think, equivalent to meeting his extraordinary words on the page in the pilot script, which I just fell in love with. And I just immediately had gratitude for this person who had conceived of Helly R, who I also fell in love with on the page. And, you know, throughout, I've just felt Dan's incredible tenderness and playfulness with language and this huge heart that he brings to the work and to each of these characters. I really feel like the innies and their innocence and their vulnerability and wonderment are just so present with Dan as a human. And yeah, I really have valued our friendship from the get-go.
Britt, so hot.
I mean it.
Well, Britt, you said something in another, I think it was a Ringer piece that was about season 2, and said that Dan has access to awe, which is such a nice, specific way of talking about somebody. And that does apply to a lot of Severance at that any sense you were talking about. I think season 2, it adapts a little bit. But can you talk a little bit more about what that awe means for you guys in making the show?
Yeah, awe. I mean, it's the root of awesome.
We'll pull out the dictionary and
but it's really like a wonderful organizing principle, right? To move through life with a sense of like what inspires awe. And again, these pure consciousnesses that Dan wrote that wake up on the severed floor, they're filled with a sense of awe. And for Helly R, it's a sense of awe at how unjust the circumstances feel. But I think awe brings you into a sense of like presence and curiosity. And that feels really important to the story that Dan is writing.
Yeah. So you guys head into season 2. You built this relationship in season 1. You've gotten past COVID restrictions. I know making season 2 had its own challenges. It really feels like the years that Severance has been made has been like this insane series of obstacles for the entire industry. So well done getting a show made. But I wonder if you can talk through, I guess, starting with you, Dan, like when you've got the scripts, you're ready to go, you're getting everyone back in the groove. What's your first step? Do you send the script to everybody? Do you schedule a phone call? How do you get everyone back into the space for making the second season?
Yeah, well, the scripts sort of came out one at a time. We got them to the actors sort of one at a time. And, this is a show where a lot of the time we're reworking the scripts in the months and weeks and days and sometimes minutes leading up to shooting. And so, it's always presented as sort of a collaboration. I mean, it's always something where I'm excited to show people, the actors and the crew what we've got and then sort of hear their feedback. And then, tweaks and alterations are made and new ideas come in that make it more exciting and more awesome, you could say. And so it wasn't, it wasn't like we sat down and we read through the whole season. It was something that sort of came piece by piece. But I do remember it was just so strange because we had done the first season. I had never done a second season before. And the first season felt I was so happy with how it had turned out that it almost felt blasphemous to come in and be writing like new Severance at first.
It's like doing a sequel that everyone's like, is this a good idea?
Yeah, it's like, what is this? It's like I'm writing lines for Helly, but they're different. They're new. But so it was scary in a way, but it was what you were saying. It was getting everybody back together and hearing the words out of, Britt's mouth and Zach's mouth and Tremel and Adam and Patricia and everybody and John, and just like hearing it in the actual voices of these amazing actors was like, okay, we're back. Like, this doesn't feel blasphemous anymore. This feels holy.
But Britt, you had said that at least for parts of the show that, for this double act that you're doing, that you had that clear from the beginning. As much as the show might have changed, you kind of knew that there was, you were basically doing two different people, even though we didn't know it from the start.
Yeah, that puzzle was laid out ahead of time pretty carefully. But yeah, like Dan said, I like to use a lot of analogies. It feels like we all have part of the puzzle Each department, each actor, each writer, each person working, and we're all kind of like detailing that puzzle piece and then comparing it with each other to make sure they still fit together. And but each of us have this job to stand in the perspective of whatever our character or characters are and make sure we communicate with the other departments well about the literal information that perspective has, but also how they're moving through their emotional journeys. And it's great fun. It's a lot of hard work, but there are a lot of checks and balances and collaborations that happen that inform each other. It's kind of this like mycelial network or something.
I mean, for you in those early episodes where you've got Helena standing in kind of in this, secret spy mode, and I think you said like you're shooting out of order, so, you're going back and forth between lots of different things. Like as detailed as you're willing to go, Britt, like what is that process for being a character within a character or, knowing where you are, how you stand, how you look, all of that stuff?
Right. Well, I mean, I can answer this question in a variety of ways, but they sound like different music in my head is the sort of easiest answer. And then the second one is quite literal, which is that Helena's job this season was the job of an actor, which is to step into a version of herself, maybe that she's never had the chance to inhabit, or maybe one that she's had a little access to, but it was suppressed early on. So you're asked in these kind of environments, like, what qualities do you share with your character? And like Helly and Helena, they have the same face. Much like me and Helly and Helena. And all the other stuff is internal work that I have the pleasure to do and sculpt these landscapes that, as Helly and Helena are traversing them, they walk through them differently. They swim through them differently. And it expresses externally in ways that I don't really have the words to explain. Yeah. But we also have these incredible design departments who, assist in making the hair, the makeup, the costumes, the lighting, the edit points. That's the other thing. We're not in control of the edit. So I may have given a variety of different internal landscapes over the course of a day, but there's one take that will end up in the audience's hands.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you say they walk differently. The walk is very famous at this point, so that's the part we've nailed.
I like to think that there was a whole, deleted or unseen subplot of Helena, taking an acting class or taking, the Groundlings 101, to try to get into character
An
as
actor
Helena.
prepares. She's in there.
Well, Dan, we do get these fascinating glimpses of Helena's life with her dad and, the weirdest egg eating scene in TV history, among other things. And, presumably there's much more about her life to come, so I don't want to get in too much. But how did you kind of figure out the contours of her external life? What can we get to know, and putting those super weird details in there that seemed like they really sold it to a lot of people?
It's interesting because the Egan lineage is such a thing on this show, and it's such a weird, long-standing series of traditions that we've sort of hinted at. But this is the first time we've seen it, in the present day in real time. What is it like to actually live inside that bizarre world? And so, we had a lot of it built, there's a lot of the backstory that we know in terms of, why she's eating an egg and how that relates back to, Keir and this strange parade of traditions that James was probably subject to as well. And his parents before him. And now it's this sort of bizarre sickness is being passed on to Helena. It was something where I wanted to develop some modicum of empathy for her, because I think that nobody is just evil. Nobody is out trying to destroy the world. Maybe some people are, but not in this show. And so whatever that is that's inside her, what put it there, and how long did it take for her to become this strange sort of version of herself that seems so divorced from Helly.
Yeah. And it does seem like there's this really interesting, like, Helena enjoyed being Helly sense. And I think part of that's in the text and part of that's in your performance, Britt. But it does feel like that's leading us somewhere, that she's not a full monster, that she has this kind of flickering of something awakening in her that we haven't seen the full result of yet. Is that, Britt, how do you agree with that being the read on her experience on the severed floor?
I mean, without question, no one has ever connected with Helena in the way that the innies do. And I think that has a huge effect on rattling her sense of identity and her sense of her upbringing, like all of the ways that she was taught that innies are inhuman. I think she has her perspective shifted by how she's treated and looked at.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how much you guys have read Reddit board theories. I know that's a whole like can of worms, but there had been people who had clocked into the swap way earlier than I did. I was completely taken by surprise by it. But Dan, it feels like for you and the rest of the writing team, like it wasn't a surprise that was held that like if you had figured it out beforehand, it would be ruined. And I don't know how much you guys think about audience expectations in that way and when to reveal and when not to. But that in particular felt so well handled in that it wouldn't. If someone online figured it out, no one would be disappointed by the end of it. Like, how did you guys think through what was okay for people to figure out on their own as they watched that specific part of the season?
Yeah, it was something that we were always kind of okay with. There was even a version, that we conceived of where we were going to reveal at the end of episode 2 to the audience that it was Helena, and we were going to spend some time with the audience being ahead of the characters. Ultimately, that didn't seem as satisfying, and then we tried a version where we're like, okay, let's try it where like nobody, there's basically no hint, and then it's this big jolting surprise. At the end of the day, it felt like the most fun thing would be to let the audience in on the process, kind of, and give them just enough where and we know the sort of the weird organic life form that the fandom has become where it communicates with itself and people share theories and people speculate. And so for my part, I had a good sense that this was something that people would be talking about and arguing about. And that's just, to me, that was where the fun was going to lie. And I was really happy that it worked out the way it did.
Yeah. Yeah, Britt, you've, I think, reposted a bunch of people's like fan art and stuff like that on Instagram, like the engagement with knowing that there's this many people following you. And I feel like sometimes it can feel really overwhelming for people, but it hasn't been that way for you. How have you figured out how you want to engage with the, I think, immense fandom that's emerged around this show?
John Turturro always talks about how like a TV series like this is like a conversation with our audience. And I really love that as a framework and as an organizing principle for how to engage with press. And, we're making something. And then the feedback loop is like, well, and how does it land with you? How does it resonate with you? And I can't think of a greater gift as an artist than to see someone else being inspired to be creative based on something that you've made. So yeah, people who are like making drawings and songs, and that just feels so wonderfully generative. And, I've had multiple people tell me that they're having conversations intergenerationally with their family for the first time because they're all watching the show together.
Wow.
Whoa.
And for me, I'm like, that's so wonderful. I don't know what else, like, I don't have the words to describe how great that feels for parents and their teenage kids to be talking about, the different analogies you can draw out of this show. But really at the core of it is like, what does it mean to be human? I think, what does it mean to be human, and who am I really?
Yeah, I mean, the parent-child stuff in your storyline alone, like that's, if people are going really deep, then that's, you guys are doing family therapy sessions or something like that. Dan, do you have a similar relationship on the fan art, response aspect of it? I mean, as you try to write the third season, I have to imagine you have to have some kind of distance so that you can make it and not just read other people's version of it.
Yeah. It's funny. I wish so much that I could engage more with the fandom in terms of like responding to stuff. And I think I get a little anxious about it because I feel like once I start, it's going to be hard to stop. It's going to be like I'm going to want to like every single thing and comment. And there's also a difference between looking at the art, which is so amazing, and looking at the theories, which are also so amazing.
But yeah.
For the latter, it does put you in danger of getting in your head too much and sort of losing track of the thread that you've been on this whole time and wanting to go down all these other different avenues because they're really cool. And it's like there absolutely could be an incredible version of the show that is that. But we can't do everything. We have to try to service the story that we've been telling. And it is, there's a lot of sort of nervousness inherent with it of wanting to make the show that every individual person wants it to be, because people do, they come and they put their own context into it. And that's what's so beautiful about making a sort of long form piece of art like this. But again, at the end of the day, like you just got to keep going in the process you've been doing the whole time and hope that fans will keep going with you on that journey.
But I also love how open you've been about how it's changed. You know, I think you said that you had an idea for the goats and it turned out to be different. And, you know, I think in the last decade, there's been this, they have to have a plan the whole time and they have to have the full seasons mapped out. And I don't think that's how any creative process really works. It feels like you've been helping kind of take away that misconception I think people have that you have to have everything rigorously mapped out for a TV show to work.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and it is. I think people are, you know, they've watched shows where they invested a lot of their time and energy into it, and then they were like, oh, they didn't know what they were doing the whole time, you know, they lost their way, and I understand that that's a frustrating feeling. I've felt that as a fan, but at the same time, I do think that you have to, somewhere in there, there's the right balance. I don't know what it is exactly, but like, you have to be willing to fall in love with elements of the show that you didn't expect to fall in love with. Mm-hmm. And you have to be surprised by things. And you also have to, you know, sometimes I look at the finished episode and I go, oh, that wasn't quite the tone I thought it was. It's different. It's this own new thing that contains some of what I put in and some of what everybody else put in. And it became this surprising thing. And you have to, you know, it's like a child. You have to let it be what it is and help it grow as best you can, regardless of what you maybe originally had planned for it.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's not a collaborative process. It's just this, you know, static thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you guys about the finale and, you know, the final shot of it also, but the finishing Cold Harbor sequence, which I had someone tell me, and I didn't read the original interview, so I hope I have this right, that the phone call scene in It's a Wonderful Life was a point of inspiration for when we've got Helly and Mark kind of finishing this thing and this, like, you know, intense emotional feeling while talking about something that's completely unrelated to it. Am I passing along false information? I just love that scene in that movie, and I was hoping it was true.
It was something that Ben had mentioned when we were blocking the scene.
Okay.
And when Helly comes to be close to Mark as he's making his final binning of the numbers. Yeah, this kind of wanting to be close, but also they're under surveillance, you know, which so much of the show is that way. They're not quite in a private space, but they're also kind of saying goodbye and want to feel that the electricity of being close.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many moments, and Dan, I imagine this is part of your thought process too, in the show where people are saying one thing and they're trying to capture something else entirely. Like Bert and Irving is a lot of that as well. Do you feel like the world of Severance just lends itself to that, toward a conversation becoming two different things at once?
Yeah, I mean, like, to Britt's point, it is like, especially on the severed floor at any given time, you don't know the degree to which you are being watched and listened to. And so there is always a little bit of a performance happening, I think, you know, whether you're Helena pretending to be Helly or Helly actually being Helly, but, you know, knowing that the company may be watching, you know, it sort of forces people to wear masks in a way. And, you know, in a way it is a show about masks because, you know, you have a character like Cobell who's not severed, but also you get the sense that she's had to sort of build herself up into a certain persona, you know, and then she has this alternate persona with Miss Selvig. And So yeah, it's a lot about that. People being very aware of how they're perceived at any given time.
Yeah. And then, Britt, I think you'd also said that obviously for that final run that The Graduate was something that you guys were getting into. And, I don't think we follow that shot through the way that we do in The Graduate and kind of watch the misgivings. But how did that as a reference point, help you in getting that final moment of the season down?
So much running.
In heels, which is not nothing.
No, actually, she's barefoot.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is an important detail,
Very
I think.
practical, yeah.
And was something I felt, was important for Helly to reclaim her bare feet or pantyhosed feet, as it were. But the sort of Rolodex of emotions that are flowing through Mark and Helly after they've made this decision, after Mark has made this decision to live, and Helly has made this decision to see him one more time. Then the aftermath of what that decision means and what's next are running through their systems as they run through the hall like wild horses, free but trapped.
Did you allow yourself, I don't know if you know what happens after that, but what do you think Helly thinks is going to happen after that? If there's a way to talk about that without spoiling, because it's kind of hard to know if they're just truly living in the moment or if there's kind of a point of thinking, oh, wait a second, this might not turn out the way that we want it to.
Well, it is my job to think like Helly and Helena. That is my job when I'm filming. But like all humans, we have 1,000 upon 1,000 thoughts in every moment.
Sure.
So for me to select one of them would be, I think, unfair to the storyline and unfair to, what the audience might be thinking that she's thinking. And I think as actors, we give options.
Yeah.
In our performance, we give options of how this character might move through the world or think. And as of yet, there's no way to translate those thoughts into a text form that we can deliver to the audience. But that's what's beautiful about, I think, film and television is it's a visual art form, and you're capturing something that hits the audience in the chest. And I don't know if the thought process is as important as how it resonates, if that makes sense.
Well, and the characters live on in the audience's brains in a way that I think television is uniquely suited to doing. Like you saying, it matters what the audience think happened. Like that feels valid in this format because, the characters are in our houses. Like they feel like part of our lives in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan, again, you're working on season 3, so we're not going to be able to talk about what gets into it. But, having jumped through, a million hoops to get these first 2 seasons made, having the second season land that well, is that feeling of, oh my God, I can't write words for these people. It's not real. Has that gone away? Does it feel a little bit more like a real thing that you make a third season than it did for a second season?
God help me, I thought it would. I really thought it would. I was because I was so nervous for the first season. For the first season as well.
Sure.
But then especially for the second season, because it was like, how do you replicate that?
Yeah.
And then the fact that we actually somehow pulled it off, I was like, okay, now it's going to be easy. And I'm going to wake up every day, just chill and excited to work. And there's going to be no imposter syndrome. It's going to be great.
Imposter syndrome on your own show. I just feel like if there's any time you don't have to have it.
You would think. You would really think. No. And it is easier in a lot of ways because we've done it now twice, and there's less sort of blindly stumbling around to find what it is. I think we have a better sense of who the characters are and what they would do in a given situation. But I think that I've come to the grim realization that the anxiety might be needed. It might be that's the path you have to walk through, is the thing that makes you nervous and you're like, oh, is this going to work?
Yeah.
Or is this going to fall flat? I think you have to embrace that in order to get to what's on the other side.
Yeah, it's one of the worst things about adulthood. You just get older and think that things will get less scary, and they don't. And
they get way scarier.
That does it for today's episode. We'll be back on Saturday with a special bonus episode. It's getting close to Emmy voting starting, and there are a lot of people to talk to, so look forward to that. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, Chris Feil. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on Saturday.